Welcome to Section 420, Talkin Yankees. If you come to a fork in the road, take it. Now, it's a classic Yogiism by Yogi Berra, and in this episode, we're going to speak with Eve Schaenen. She's the executive director of the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center on the campus of Montclair State University in Little Falls, New Jersey. She'll discuss the museum and all the different exhibitions it has to offer its visitors. Hi, Eve. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you're the executive director of the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center. So, how did you get involved in the museum? How did you get thrown into this?
Sure. A lot of people ask me that question, especially sort of envious people who want to know, how you get to land in such a terrific role. It's a great honor to be there. The Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center is in Montclair, New Jersey, on the campus of Montclair State University. That's where Yogi Berra raised his family. It's also where I raised mine. So that's the direct connection. But I have a long history of working with nonprofit organizations, and I'm also a longtime baseball fan, originally from New York City. I have New York City baseball in my blood, so to speak. So when this position came along, it was really, as I say, it was a great honor to take.
Cool. Yeah, so I was going to ask that, did you have any sort of at least baseball background into this, or just kind of like, I was just curious because, let's just say you had no baseball background. Now you're like curating a museum for one of the best baseball players ever. Did you grow up a Yankee fan, or is this kind of like just like baseball in general?
I have to tread very lightly here because I sort of swing both ways, so to speak. My stepfather, who was very close to me, as father to me, was raised in the Bronx. Was obviously was a great Yankee fan. One of the greatest generations, World War II vet like Yogi was. So, Yankees were always a presence in all the books, all the stories, all the movies that we ever saw. At the same time, I have a grandfather who was from Brooklyn Dodgers guy, through and through. And so the lineage there goes from the Brooklyn Dodgers to the New York Mets. So there's some Mets fandom in my background as well. So, given the fact that Yogi was both a Yankee and a Met, I feel like it's safe ground for me, to be at the museum.
Yeah, I think like the idea that Yogi wore the Met uniform a little bit, it covers you there. It covers American and National League a little bit. So he got you covered there as a player and coach actually for the Mets.
Absolutely.
And just before, kind of get into the details of the museum, what's your kind of overall role there in terms of executive director? What are you responsible for? Like, what duties you have to do? What do you have to manage?
Right. Well, really, it's I'm responsible for the team there, and we very much think of ourselves as a team. There's no solo work there. A museum is, essentially in the business of connecting community around Yogi's story and around Yogi's legacy and around Yogi's values. So, I work with an education director who does all of our education outreach, sort of the learning center part of our work. I work with an events director who arranges a lot of public programs and events that, the museum has become known for. We have a staff of volunteers who help out at the museum, docents who work there, artists and curators who work with us when we commission new works. One of the great things about being sort of sitting at the hub of that place is it connects to so many wonderful people. We do a lot of work with the veterans community, so I do outreach in that direction. We're strong, we're small but mighty, and so a lot of what we do is rely on outside partners to connect us to the audiences that we're trying to reach.
All right, and just in terms of that area, would you have any backstory in terms of like why Yogi fell in love with that area, or is this just something that he just lived there as he played as a Yankee and just stayed there and loved it? Is there any sort of connection to what really brought him to that part of Jersey?
Sure. I think and Montclair, New Jersey is sometimes referred to as the Upper West Side of New Jersey. It's a pretty easy commute from here to Yankee Stadium. He very much wanted to raise his family, his 3 boys, he and Carmen both, his wife, outside of the city. And so Montclair, when he saw it, they fell in love with it. And, there's a house just down the road from where I live. I walk my dog past it every day. And, that's where he raised his family and is very attached. He also, when he was, after he had lived here and after he retired from baseball, he was given an honorary degree by Montclair State University, which is what brought the connection to Montclair State. It's why the museum is on the property of Montclair State. There is Yogi Berra Stadium, which is the university's baseball stadium is adjacent to the museum. So this was really, where he spent the later years of his life. And, when you move around Montclair, just about everybody has a Yogi story because he was so accessible, sort of famously. Everybody ran into him. He was at the bagel shop. He was, getting his hair cut. He was at the local Italian place. I mean, he was everywhere. And, as you well know, and all Yankee fans know, he was the most approachable, easy to get along with, accessible guy you could ever know. And, so one of the great joys of my job is just about every day I hear a terrific Yogi story from someone, locally who had the privilege of meeting him and connecting with him.
You yourself, since you're, from the same area, was living there, did you ever get to meet him before you got involved in the museum? I mean, do you ever get to bump into him, or at least maybe have a Yogi story of your own?
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened to me is something that happens to a lot of New Yorkers. I moved with my family out to Montclair. I'm walking down the street and peek in the window of a cafe, and it was like a triple take because I realized that it is Yogi Berra sitting at a table, eating a bowl of pasta. I think that sort of thrill, especially having grown up in New York where he was just, a legend in my family, was sort of astonishing. And, my kids who didn't really know better, they were young at the time. I had to sort of spell out who exactly this person was. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody sort of had that kind of amazing Yogi moment where they realized, oh, he's a neighbor, he's here, he lives here, and he's certainly not hiding behind any ivory tower. He's accessible to everybody. So that's really something special.
And that's what's special about him. Like, you look at this guy, he's like 5'7". He's not like your typical strapping 6'3" athlete that's like, 250 pounds, kind of this short, stubby guy. But for a lot of maybe younger Yankee fans who just don't appreciate Yogi Berra, just quickly, I mean, a 15-time All-Star, 10-time world champion, more than anybody, one more than Joe DiMaggio. And it was kind of that bridge from the Joe D Yankees up to the Mickey Mantle Yankees. 3-time MVP, and even the 2 of the years that he didn't get the MVP, he finished second place. So you have someone who could possibly have been a 5-time MVP. And that's just on the field. Off the field, he was actually spent some time in the military service. And was actually involved in the D-Day, the Normandy invasion. So this guy's like Superman.
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it was one of the few ways, to sort of, make young people who come through the museum understand, as we'll say, Jeter only got 5, right? So it's like, 10. We have the rings on display at the museum. It's one of the highlights of our permanent collection. And the kids, I think it takes a moment for them to stand in front and realize 10 rings, that won't, it arguably will never happen again. And in addition to all the stats that you just cited, sort of the amazing accolades he had as a player, I think it's worth noting that in that period, between DiMaggio and Mantle, 7 seasons in a row, Yogi led the Yankees in RBIs, right? When both those guys were on the team. So, I mean, he really was, in many ways, the anchor of that team through all those years. And, yeah, I think sometimes because he's such an outsized figure with the Yogiisms and his personality, people forget what a remarkable athlete he was, really extraordinary. And again, because he didn't look the part necessarily, he wasn't sort of the big strapping guy, but, best bad ball hitter, the Yankees ever knew, just unbelievable, became a remarkable catcher. It's one of the things that we do like to share at the museum is part of Yogi's legacy is that kind of overcoming, that perseverance. And he himself admitted when he started as a catcher at the Yankees, he was bad. That's what he said. He needed Bill Dickey, who was, the Yankees' great catcher at the time, to really mentor him and work with him. And he famously put in hours after every practice training with Dickey, to become the catcher that he was. And I think that, for young people coming through the museum who maybe don't see themselves as the great athlete, aren't necessarily as confident, to hear about Yogi's story and see what he was able to do is really inspiring. So
yeah. And just throw a few more things out there, just in terms of just his accolades. I mean, caught 173 complete games, which is a record, and also caught the infamous Game 6 of World Series against Dart-Lawson, the perfect game in World Series. And to boot, even later on, when his knees got a little achy, transitioned to left field for the Yankees. Which, if you remember the old Yankee Stadium, left field was tough. It was actually maybe just as tough as most center fields in other ballparks, especially the way it was designed. The sun would come in their eyes, and he played flawlessly. So like you said, not the most maybe graceful looking person, but he handled himself fine in left field just to adapt to that with no problems. It's not hard for a catcher to now be an outfield. It's almost, you would not see that today at all.
No, absolutely. and not to mention the sort of never striking out, striking out 12 times in an entire season, early 50s, when, there were players today who strike out, 12 times in a single series. So, he just, it's another level of play that, and some of those statistics, when you start to really dig in and thinking about them, they just, they blow people away. And again, that speaks to what an extraordinary athlete he was, in addition to being this incredible human being.
And now just getting back to the museum in terms of the Yogi message, what's the overall values or message you try to convey to young fans or even older fans as well? Just what's the aspiration of the museum that people should get when they walk into the doors?
Well, I think, one of the beautiful things about the museum is that, the ideals of the museum are written all over our walls, and they really are the values that Yogi stood for, starting with respect. We always begin and end with that. It's one of the things he was best known for, whether it was respecting, Elston Howard as the first African-American Yankee. When he came on the team, going out of his way to congratulate Jackie Robinson after losing to the Dodgers, really sort of always rising above to do the respectful thing. Perseverance, we just talked about that, sticking with it, becoming the amazing catcher that he became because of hard work and grit. Teamwork, you don't get through a perfect game without, really the definition of teamwork, working with Don Larson and all that great pitching staff of the Yankees when he played. Those are the values, what we find is, yes, they're critical to being a great baseball player, but of course, as we know, they transcend to all of life, right? So, you want to be good in your family, you want to be good in your community, you want to, perform in business, wherever it might be. Those qualities are really the ones that carry particularly young people through. And so all of the education work that we do, a lot of our programming focuses on just that. Those are the ideals that kind of drive all the work that we do, whether it's specific to, a particular incident in Yogi's life or, a larger theme around baseball and sports. It's always about those ideals that are, again, all over the walls of the museum.
And, thanks for actually bringing up the Elston Howard things. Actually, last year, actually did a spot on my show highlighting him. And, one of those things that with, Elston Howard, obviously they both played the same position now, two great players. And that's part of the reason why Yogi would play a little left field, just to divert and be a good team player, where I'm not going to name names, but a lot of athletes today, feel like someone's taking your job, would not be too kind to that. But Yogi, again, the type of personality person to embrace that and do what's best for the team.
Absolutely. No. And I think, it's been, again, one of the great privileges of my role there to meet not just the visitors who come to the museum, but the wife and daughter of Elston Howard are great friends of the museum, longstanding friends. And in fact, Arlene Howard was honored this year with the 2020 Yogi Berra Museum Award. Unfortunately, because of what's going on with public health, we couldn't hold the awards ceremony. We will be holding it in April of next year, 2021, where we can actually hand her statue. Just that window into the real people behind the names that, one hears about historically, it's really, it really brings those stories home in a very real way. And, certainly what Elston went through, again, his wife and daughter are the first to say that Yogi went out of his way, as did Carmen, to make them feel welcome, to make them feel secure, to make it feel like it was okay. Even when you think that Elston went on to take Yogi's position on the field, it makes the story even more, frankly, powerful.
And getting to Jackie Robinson a little bit now, a little side note, I'm gonna say that infamous picture where Jackie stole home. I think he was out. If they had replay, I would say he's out, but we'll let the Dodgers get that one. That's okay.
No. He was out.
Yeah. That replay, he was out. He was out.
Talking to me, I got my Yogi shirt on. He was out.
He was out.
Yeah.
But I saw, obviously, this season marks the 100th anniversary of Negro League Baseball, and I see you had a special wing into that. So how'd that come about? How'd you were able to put that together with all those great photographs?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That was really an exciting process. We knew that the 100th, the centennial of the Negro Leagues was coming up in 2020. And I felt it was very important that we tell that story in our museum, as we just said, because Yogi was all about respecting all the players of the game. These were some of the greatest players ever to play the game. And yet they never really, for all kinds of reasons that we know, because of structural racism, because of Jim Crow, because of all those reasons, they never really got the attention that, they so well deserved. That story needs to be told as part of the baseball story. So what I did is I actually flew down with a couple of team members to Kansas City to visit the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum down there. Huge shout out to Bob Kendrick, Ray Doswell. Those guys are amazing. It's a gorgeous museum if you've never been there. And said, we need to tell that story up at the Yogi Berra Museum. What, how can we work this out? And as I say, it was because it felt like an important part of the larger baseball story, but also very particular to where the museum is. The Yogi Berra Museum, as I just, as you know, is in Montclair, New Jersey. Just really a stone's throw from us is Newark, New Jersey, home of the Newark Eagles, one of the great Negro Leagues teams. There's also Patterson, which is the birthplace of Larry Doby. And so, the Negro League story is a local story for us too. So I really felt like it was important to bring that story to our museum. I wanted, fans of Negro Leagues games who had potentially attended Negro Leagues games to come, but also young people to know this is a part of your local history. And a lot of the students that we serve are from communities of color, want to make sure that they saw this really proud moment in their history and how they're also play a role in the story of baseball. One of the other things that we did do that, to sort of bring the exhibit alive, one of the issues sometimes have with black and white photos is, particularly for younger people, it's hard to relate. It starts to feel like it was a very long time ago. We actually commissioned an augmented reality app. It uses an iPad, and when you hold the app in front of the photographs, some of them come to, sort of vivid color. And I have yet to see anyone who does it for the first time and doesn't kind of go, because it's really a sort of exciting moment of, just the technology is cool, of course, kids love tech, but it also, on a much deeper level, I think it brings these athletes alive and makes you see them as real people as opposed to sort of grainy black and white photos. And, that's a lot of what we're all about, is sort of bringing this history alive and making it feel, something that young people especially can connect to. So that's with that exhibit. It's actually, so many people wanted to see it that it was supposed to run through June of 2020 of this year, and we extended it through the end of 2020. This is where I need to add, of course, like so many cultural institutions, we had to close the doors to the museum on March 13th in response to COVID-19, wanting to keep everybody safe. And we really worked very hard to essentially transition all of our programming to an online format, including Discover Greatness, the illustrated history of Negro Leagues baseball. So we are looking to put that entire show online on our website as a virtual gallery. We're literally working on that now in these weeks. And the field trip program that we have been using for, local area students is now a virtual field trip program. So any school, anywhere can call the museum, talk to our education director, and schedule a field trip. And we've actually been booking them 2-3 a day. Since we introduced them, because it's such great content, it's such a great story. And I think, it's a great way we can support area teachers and school districts, and also, the parents who are at home homeschooling, essentially supervising their kids' education. Again, it's part of our mission to spread those values and to sustain that legacy of Yogi, and however we can support the community during this difficult time, we're all about it. So, so that's how Discover Greatness continues to impact folks, even though the museum is closed for the time being.
And I think the time is great because, I think a lot of young people are starving for baseball, and, schools and kids, they love trips. So, even though we're in this kind of time period, so now, it's amazing. So basically they would just contact and they'd be able to sort of set up this virtual entrance into the exhibit. So that's amazing. And I saw some of those photos as well, just just for folks out there, actually put an iPad up, and again, it colorizes the picture, and it's almost like a movie, like, Field of Dreams or Sandlot, where like, these baseball players come out of the weeds and come at you, and it's like, wow, that really brings it to life. And I saw it before. I thought it was amazing. Yeah. And also this museum itself, in terms of for the young fans that when they do get a chance to visit, what other features are there for them? I saw there was a pitch machine, I guess, like a radar gun.
Yes. Well, it's Pitch. It's an interactive baseball experience. And actually now here's where I get to have, a little bit of bragging rights. We just, Pitch is another piece that we commissioned. We wanted to bring something, interactive and active, for young people. It basically allows you to throw a real ball, not a real baseball. We are a museum, but it is a soft ball. And it will track the speed of your throw and the accuracy of the pitch. And there's sort of a fun animation that suggests Yogi and Jackie Robinson, Jackie at the plate and Yogi catching. But at the same time, this pitch just in the last couple of weeks was awarded 2 major design prizes, 2 really internationally acclaimed interaction design prizes, which is pretty cool for a small baseball museum in New Jersey to be competing against major institutions, Carnegie Mellon University, I can't remember who else is on the roster, major museums internationally. And our pitch, because it really is cool and really is fun and beautifully designed, won these 2 prizes. So, we're awfully proud and excited to get folks back into the museum so they can engage with that. What's really nice about Pitch 2, I'll just say, is we knew that kids would love it because, kids like to play. What I can't get over is we have seniors playing with it. We have, entire families playing with it. We have a lot of special needs folks who come in and are able to interact with it. We had a group from an assisted living facility. They were all in wheelchairs. We just wheeled them up and they were all throwing balls. So, again, as a museum director, to see that kind of interaction, through the generations is just, that's the dream. So that's been really great. Beyond that, beyond pitch, the museum is full of fantastic artifacts from Yankee history, for your Yankee fans. I mentioned the rings, before. We have all of Yogi's 10 World Series rings with the Yankees. We also have all the rings that the Yankees were ever given, all 27. The first one actually is not a ring, it's a pocket watch from back in the 20s. They didn't get a ring, they got a pocket watch. There are, all kinds of other, fabulous artifacts, love letters that Yogi wrote from the road to his wife, Carmen, original bats, mitts. We have something that we call the Mittmobile, which are really 16 different vintage catcher's mitts spanning, back to the early 19th century. So you can see how the mitt evolved, how the sorry about that. I just got a
Dinner's ready.
Is it okay? I was just gonna say sorry about that. Anyway, I have to tell you, honestly, that was Lindsay Berra who just texted in. Lindsay Berra is Yogi's granddaughter.
That's all good. Good luck.
She's on the board of the museum and is a great friend of the museum and become a good friend of mine. Anyway, there's just, certainly for any Yankee fan, I could just go on and on. It's just like a candy store. It also was designed by the same folks who designed Cooperstown, the Baseball Hall of Fame. So, if you're in the New York City area and, it's too long a trip to go all the way up to Cooperstown, we're a straight shot, through the Lincoln Tunnel, Route 3, 12 miles west of New York City. It's a really great trip. I encourage, families, fans, young people, old people. It's a great stop.
Yeah, I'll be all over that pitching machine. And just, also getting about the museum itself, the theater, Nice Sea Theater. What type of expositions or videos do you normally show in there?
Well, the theater is, I have to say, when I first looked at the facility, it was one of my favorite spots. It's a sort of reminiscent of an old stadium. And we do all kinds of public programs in that theater. Most recently, in conjunction with the Discover Greatness exhibit, we had a panel talking about the Negro Leagues. First, we screened a documentary about Negro Leagues baseball. It's called The Other Boys of Summer. The creator of that film is Lauren Meyer, another great friend of the museum. She's a tremendous filmmaker. So we screened the documentary and then had a panel that included Lauren, who's the filmmaker, Bob Kendrick, who I talked about, the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. We were lucky to have Harold Reynolds there, the great, former player and television analyst. He lives in Montclair. Then we had Pedro Sierra, who's a former Negro Leagues player, and really sort of one of the best friends that the museum has, Willie Randolph, the New York Yankee great, who basically showed up and said, oh, sure, what can I do? And he sat on the panel as well. So that was an example. Folks come, they get to, learn about baseball, they get to interact. It's a very intimate space. And so, all the programming we do there, is very successful just because it's such a way to, get up close and personal. And again, that feels in keeping with Yogi's spirit, who was always very accessible and always, was very available to his public.
And, you mentioned Carmen a few times, and they had a very special, every marriage is special, but they really had a special relationship. And, Yogi was a good guy. And I think a lot of times too, he would go out with her in the 50s in terms of I think she would keep him away from Mantle and Ford and maybe some of the off the field fun they would have. Yeah. But can you have any insight on their relationship? Why it was so special and, why was this able to endure for, throughout many, many, many decades?
Well, I mean, I will say, particularly in this area, as many people come and tell me Carmen stories as tell me Yogi stories. I mean, she was beloved. A couple years ago, we honored Jenny Steinbrenner with one of our Yogi Berra Museum awards. She actually received the Carmen Berra Award. And she said, Carmen was just the perfect Yankee wife. And that's really what you hear. She was supportive. She was strong. She had, ideas that she shared with them. I mean, by everything I hear also, as much as it looks from the Life magazine profiles like a kind of traditional 50s marriage, I think in many ways it was. But, she certainly had a voice in that marriage. She was a partner to him as, and a friend as much as she was a supportive wife. He listened to her and she contributed a lot, lots of savvy. Everyone talks about how smart she was and what great business acumen she had. And of course, she was a beautiful person. She was a beautiful woman. And, that really was a love story, of the sort that you don't really hear too much about anymore, for all those years. And, they have a beautiful family to show for it, with their 3 sons and grandchildren and now great-grandchildren. So, Carmen, again, Carmen is really, particularly for the folks who were personally connected to Yogi, she's as much as part of his story as anything else. I think, the Yankee players who encountered Yogi and have such a strong love for who he was and as a person, and also as a player, have sort of adopted the museum a little bit. And so we're very lucky to have their support and enjoy their participation in a lot of the programs that we do.
Okay, Bo, so we're in the bottom of the 9th here, almost done.
Okay.
So, you're part of the museum. What's like maybe the one thing that sort of surprised you, or the biggest thing you've learned, or maybe the greatest thing you've learned since you've started, in this role versus maybe something you never knew about before?
I think I always, again, having grown up with baseball fans in my family, I always knew that baseball was sort of, a central piece of what is essentially the American heritage. I think about Ken Burns's documentary. We use that in some of our education material about baseball. But I think that, seeing folks come through and the way in which baseball connects people, the way it can, connect generations, connect community together, whether it's veterans, whether it's, local regional communities, youth groups, older people. Baseball has a little bit of magic to it. I mean, I think that, you hear about that, but in my job, I get to see that all the time. It isn't like other sports. It is its own very particular, unique, aspect of our whole culture. And I think it's one of the things that makes, our country very special. And it's one of the things that attaches us to our heritage. And we just want as many people as possible to feel that connection. Because I think we all need that. And, arguably right now, given what's going on, if there was ever a time where we need to all feel connected, it's now. So I think that's, one of the most special pieces of working at the museum.
All right, Eve. Well, I appreciate you joining us again. The Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center on the campus of Montclair University in Little Falls, New Jersey. Check out the website. And of course, I'm sure you'll keep everyone updated when the doors open. We can physically go there, but of course, there's virtual opportunities now. So, of course, Yogi's known for his yogiisms, and the best one is, it ain't over till it's over.